Today we shall explore a discourse known as the Saraniya Sutta. This is found in the book of 11, the gradual sayings, Sutta number 11. Now, I think this morning you recited the taking refuge, right? You say Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, and Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, and Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. So this word Saranang, so very similar, has got the same meaning here, Sarana. So this discourse is about what is it that is our true refuge, okay? Of course, the Buddha, and then from the Dhamma itself is the teachings of the Buddha, right? So what is it within the Buddha's teachings that actually will provide us that refuge? So today is a very short discourse called the Saraniya Sutta, and you find it interesting that actually the Buddha gave some very practical advice, not just abstract ideals, on what we can actually practice in our everyday life. Okay, so this is called the Saraniya Sutta. Now, basically, the Buddha here, as a summary, it lays down 6 qualities. Okay, so these 6 qualities that provide refuge, that means true protection. And as I said, they aren't abstract ideals, but also practical qualities. Now, what are these 6? So let's take a look at this. Yeah. So the 6 qualities mentioned in this short discourse, very short discourse actually, is 3 actually is on loving kindness. I think some of you also practice metta, loving kindness. So it's loving kindness through body, through speech, and through the mind. So later we will dive into what the Buddha meant by loving kindness from body, speech, and mind. So besides cultivating loving kindness, the Buddha also talks about the importance of generosity. Okay, sharing. I think in here it's talk about sharing one's possession, sharing what one has with others. So that's the 4th one, and the 5th one actually talks about being ethical, having a moral conduct. I think you also recited this morning about the 5 precepts. So as lay Buddhists, so that's actually our most fundamental practice. Okay, so every Buddhist, irrespective of whichever tradition that you follow, okay, so the 5 precepts becomes of paramount importance. So that's the ethical part. And to sum it up, the Buddha always talks about the importance of having right understanding, right views. In fact, I'm sure you're familiar with the Noble Eightfold Path, right? So in the Noble Eightfold Path, you find that there are 8 practices, or 8 qualities we should develop. And of course, the first one is always right understanding, right views, samadhi. Okay? So it is only with right views that all the other aspects of the Eightfold Path will fall into place. Likewise, even meditation. All right? You may, of course, we all know how important meditation is, right? Bhavana. But if you only meditate without having right view, right understanding of why you're meditating or what meditation is all about, then that itself is incomplete, not adequate, right? So right view is always very, very, very critical. And I cannot re-emphasize how important it is. In fact, in another discourse, the Buddha said that right view is like the dawning of the sun. Like early in the morning, the first thing you see the sun. So that marks the beginning of the day. All right, so very important for us to have right view. Anyway, the Buddha talks about 6 very important qualities we should always cultivate and develop. Okay, loving kindness in action, in others, in body, in our speech, in our thoughts, and then sharing of possessions, which is another name for generosity. All right, sometimes you're familiar with the Trinity called Dana, Sila, Bhavana. Right, Dana means giving, Sila, of course, the precepts, and then Bhavana. Now, Bhavana, of course, the word means to cultivate, to develop. All right, so what do we cultivate? We cultivate wisdom. Right, so again, back to right views. Okay, so Dana, Sila, Bhavana. So in that formulation, you find that the Buddha talks about the importance of generosity, the importance of ethical conduct, living our life in accordance with a moral code, like the 5 precepts, and of course, always anchored on right understanding, to have a deep insight into reality, into what things as they really are. Okay, so that actually is the overall summary of this discourse. So let's dive in a little bit on each one of it, and then see how it's relevant in our modern world. Okay, I think Babs has given the topic as for the modern world. Now, the modern world is full of uncertainty, isn't it? I'm sure those of you who are in management, you have heard of the word VUCA, right? VUCA, isn't it? So we live in a world of VUCA, right? So how can we navigate our lives, right, through our study and practice of the Dhamma as we navigate? Because we have to live in this world, all right? So you have to interact with people. You have to have relationships with your boss, and if you are family people, you have relationship with your spouse, with your children, all right, with friends, with relatives. So all these things are real. And the Buddha actually spent a lot of his teachings on telling us or advising us how we can actually live a life in this world of so-called difficulties, so that we have peace and harmony and well-being. Okay? So these are the 6 qualities. Let's dive into each one of it. Now the first one the Buddha talks about is bodily metta. In other words, loving kindness through the body. Now I've extracted this from the discourse itself. So the discourse says, one maintains bodily acts of loving kindness towards companion in the holy life, openly and in private. Now of course this discourse was addressed to the monks. Yeah, it was addressed to the monastics. But just as many other discourses which the Buddha gave, even though they are addressed for monastics, but if you look at it, you contemplate, it's actually also relevant for lay people like you and me. Okay, so this is an example. So here for bodily metta, the Buddha says, one maintains bodily acts of loving kindness towards our friends, towards our relatives, towards our companions, all right, in the holy life, openly and in private. Now this word is interesting, openly and in private. Now, then the commentary explains that openly and private means you don't perform kindness just to show people that you're kind. Right? So you don't show kindness just because you come to Babs once a week on Sunday, and then today I will exhibit kindness. I'll give some dana, I'll give some donation, I'll offer food to the monks, or I'll give some donation for the temple. But on other days you don't practice it. When you're alone, you find that you're a totally different person. All right, so you don't perform kindness just to show other people that you are kind. All right, that's what is meant here. So even when no one is watching, you still help, serve, and behave respectfully. All right, so it is not just to show other people that you are kind. So that's what the Buddha meant when he said bodily metta. All right. So this word openly and in private gets repeated subsequently. So example of bodily metta, you offer a helping hand to a colleague. All right, so your colleague needs some help, you offer a helping hand. Well, being physically present and attentive, not distracted by your phone when someone is speaking. Okay, so as simple as that. Right, that's bodily loving kindness. Right, when somebody is talking to you, you show interest. Right, instead of but you look at your phone. So that's very common, isn't it? But it tells us to reflect. So Buddhist teachings actually is not so much for us to remember, but for us to reflect on what we have heard. All right, so we always need to reflect. And then non-verbal gestures like smiling, nodding, a kind touch, appropriate touch. Okay. And choosing not to act aggressively or withdraw in coldness. So that's through your body. Today, there's a science of called body language, right? Isn't it? Body language, right? Sometimes you study in psychology or even in management, right? So the body language can reveal how your character is. Okay, are you cold? Are you warm? All right, so that's why this talk is called warm-heartedness and strong bonds. Once you are warm, people can see that you are a good person. People want to associate with you. So that's how relationships get formed. So those are very important things. So the Buddha may not have used words like you must have good body language, but through his expressions of bodily metta. So in today's modern psychological language, we know what that means, right? So body language, right? Your gestures, right? And so on. Like when somebody is talking to you, you put your hand on that, or you fold your arms. It tells you, it sends off a very different message, okay? And you can show a sense of enthusiasm that somebody is saying something, you are listening. So that's your body. So body language becomes very important. Yeah? Okay, so that's an example of bodily language. Now the Buddha talks about 3, right? Body, speech, and mind. So let's see what's the second one. Verbal metta. Verbal, that means through our, through our speech. So again, one maintains verbal acts of loving kindness openly and in private. I already explained. So it's not just that, again, because you are in a temple or you're in front of a monk or a nun, that you speak very kind, very gentle words, but once you're back at home, especially, sometimes, when we work, we find that certain people, they've got, like, they wear a mask, if you are very senior, when they talk to you, they're so kind, they're so polite. But then when you hear feedback from people who are maybe at the more junior level, and they say, this guy is a monster, this guy is is a devil, the way he talks, the way he treats us, so different from the way he talks to the boss. Isn't it? I'm sure in those of you who are working, you find there are such people. In fact, I get a lot of feedback from maybe even from colleagues, say, so and so, when they are dealing with higher ups, they're very kind, the speech are fantastic, the best grammar they can think of, But when they're talking to people below them, they can be really rude and so on. So that's actually speaking. You have to be both in public as well as in private. So you must be consistent. Yeah, you must be consistent in your practice of verbal metta. Okay, so you don't only have metta for people who are above you, because you think people above you can benefit you, but people below you, they are like your slaves. So you should not do that. Yeah. So you should speak in a way that's kind, that's uplifting and respectful. Right? In many teachings the Buddha gave, like for example, there's one called what is considered as right speech, right? Now, right speech is not just not lying, right? I'm sure you know, right? Of course, not lying is a very important part of right speech, but right speech has got, in fact, in the Vacha Sutta, the Buddha talks about how right speech should have other characteristics, other features, right? For example, whatever you want to say has to be true, of course, and whatever you want to say from the verbal side, it has to be kind, it has to be generous, it has to be gentle, and very important, it has to be timely. So the Buddha give the word timeliness. So sometimes certain things we want to say, we have to reflect, is it the right time to say it? Yeah? Timeliness, okay? And then in another discourse, where the Buddha gave about speech, he was actually giving this discourse to a prince. The name of the prince, Abhaya Kumara. So the name of the discourse is called Abhaya Kumara Sutta. So in that discourse, Buddha says, whatever we say, it should be true, it should be useful, it should be beneficial. Alright? It should be true, it should be useful, it should be beneficial. Sometimes, and most of the time, it should be pleasant. But if it has to be unpleasant, it must still be true and useful. Okay? So, which means that the Buddha was very detailed in terms of the things that we say. Alright? So it's very important on that. So there are many other related teachings on what constitutes right speech. Okay? So right speech is not just not telling a lie. Right? That's a negative side, what not to do, isn't it? So what should we do? Okay? So other discourses the Buddha talks about it. So speaking in a way that's kind, that's uplifting and respectful. Okay? Respectful speech is very important. So before speaking, pause and ask, is this true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Okay? So this is also, during the time of the Buddha, there was another very wise person in Greece by the name of Socrates. You heard of Socrates? Never heard of Socrates. Oh. Young people never study about world history, right? So you don't know who is Socrates. Do you know who is Plato? Don't know who is Plato. Do you know who is Aristotle? You don't know who is Aristotle. Okay. But you know who the Buddha is, I hope, right? Okay. So Socrates was a very famous Greek thinker, philosopher. Actually he lived almost like during the Buddha's time. In fact, in education, they call it the Socratic method. In other words, you don't just blindly remember or follow. You always ask questions. Like Socrates, once his student came and talked to him, and he said, when somebody asks you a question, before you answer, you should ask him back. Mr. So-and-so, what you say, is it true? Is it useful? Is it kind? If it is so, then of course you respond. If it's not true, what's the point of responding? Right? If it's not useful, what's the point? So similarly, in the Abhayaraja Kumara Sutta, the Buddha says that one's verbal or speech, one's speech should be true, should be useful, right? Beneficial, pleasant, right? Occasionally unpleasant. If it's unpleasant, then you find the right time to say it. Okay, so the Buddha, so there are caveats, right? Even when you want to say something that's unpleasant, so there's a caveat to it. You know the meaning of caveat? You know, right? Okay. All right. So is this true? Is this kind? Is it necessary? So that's on speech. So examples, encouraging words, not sarcastic or passive-aggressive ones, not gossiping. That's why in, for example, the 10 unwholesome actions, so gossip become one of the considered as unwholesome actions, right? Backbiting, slandering. So all those things falls under what constitute as wrong speech, okay? Well, saying thank you, I appreciate that, or how can I support you, okay? Many years ago, there was a book by Ram Dass. Maybe I'm not sure you've heard of Ram Dass. One of the early meditation teachers of people like Joseph Goldstein, Jack Confield. So those of you who do Vipassana, you may have heard of these names. So he wrote a book called May I Help? May I Help? So when you have that kind of frame of mind, so you are there always like to ask, may I help? Okay? This morning you make a dedication to all the great beings, all the great Buddhas of the past, the Buddha of the present, Buddhas of the future. You also make dedication to Bodhisattvas or Bodhisattas. So these are beings who are always there to help us. They're always there to help. Like in Chinese Buddhism, you have Guan Yin, right? Guan Yin, Avalokiteshvara. What is the image of Guan Yin? Guan Yin means what? One who hears. Avalokiteshvara. You know the Malay word swara? Swara is sound, right? So Avalokiteshvara, that's Sanskrit, right? Guan Yin in Sanskrit is Avalokiteshvara. So swara means one who hears the sound of the world. What is the sound of the world? World of suffering, isn't it? World of suffering. Dukkha, the Buddha talks about dukkha. So there's a bodhisattvas like Guan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, who's always there to help us. All right? So compassion. So expression of compassion. So it is said that compassion is always there. So maybe after you walk out of the hall, you meet someone. That person could be Guan Yin in physical form. Someone who is there to support you, to assist you. Okay. So being honest, but also gentle and timely in how you say things. So the word timely, like the Buddha mentioned in the Vacha Sutta, right? Vacha Sutta, important. So these are examples of verbal metta. So you find that these are not very abstract ideals, right? This is also, if you are familiar with what today in modern management is called non-violent communication, NVC. All right? Have you heard of non-violent communication? If you are in management, then you may have heard of this word called non-violent communication. I think Michael Rosenberg, I think, who started that, who himself was a meditator. So he learned it also from meditation. So actually a lot of new thinking in psychology, actually you derive back to how some of these proponents actually learn from meditation. Alright? So because of what they learn from meditation, they apply it in a very secular way so that we can apply it. Right? So non-violent communication. Or the other word that today is increasingly used is mindful communication. Right? You've heard of the word mindful communication. So mindful communication is one aspect of, they are actually quite interrelated, non-violent communication. Okay? So these are examples of verbal metta. So well-spoken speech, right? The Vacha Sutta I mentioned just now. So 5 factors. So it's timely, you say at the right moment, it is true, it is gentle, it is beneficial, it is useful and helpful, and it's spoken with a mind of loving kindness. Right? So whatever we say, so we should always ask ourselves, right, is our speech comprising all these qualities? Right? How do we ensure that we have such qualities? So that's where mind training comes in, isn't it? That's where you do meditation. Otherwise, why do you do meditation for? All right? Do you learn meditation so that you're able to hear what your neighbors is saying and psychic powers? You learn meditation because you can levitate, you can walk on air, or is it because you can walk through the wall? That's not the purpose of meditation, right? You learn meditation so that you develop a mind of kindness, a mind of compassion, and with that mind of kindness and compassion, then you see things as they really are. And what is it when you see things as they really are? You see things as impermanence, as dukkha, as suffering, as non-self. So because of that, you make an effort to try to alleviate or reduce the suffering in this world. You see, so they're all interrelated because you understand that that's the nature of reality. Just as you suffer, other people suffer. Just as you do not want to suffer, other people also do not want to suffer. So what bodhisattvas or bodhisattvas do is they try to help to reduce the suffering of other people. All right? Why does Babs, for example, have sessions like this? So that we are all being given the opportunity to listen to the Buddha's teachings, so that we can apply Buddha's teachings and have peace of mind, happiness, harmony in our lives. That's the purpose, isn't it? So Babs himself is like a bodhisattva. Okay? So you understand that. So speech is very important, what we say to other people. Yeah? So we should always speak with a mind of loving kindness. So that's why when you do meditation, meditation helps you to actually I won't use the word control, but meditation helps you to be aware that before you react, you are very careful what to say or what to do. So that's why we make a distinction between reacting and responding. Yeah. So if you learn meditation, whatever form of meditation, then it basically teaches you that before you get angry, there's a little space, a little gap before you get angry. So then, before you get angry, before the thought of anger can arise, then you are able to respond. You respond with maybe loving kindness instead of anger. You understand? So that's the purpose of meditation. It may sound very esoteric, but if you learn meditation, that's what the end results of meditation is. It actually calms you down so that before you react easily to anger or greed, there's a little space in your mind that says, hey, hang on, hold on, you see. So that little space is what meditation will help you to develop. Okay? But you got to practice it first. Alright, if you don't, then it's not going to happen. Okay? So that's well-spoken speech. Now, the third one is mental karma. Mental metta. Mental metta, right? So one maintains mental acts of loving kindness openly and in private. So cultivating goodwill internally, even if it's not expressed outwardly. So mentally, when you say something, people can hear, can see, right? When you do bodily metta, people can see. But mental metta, nobody can see. Only you yourself can see it, right? Or can understand it. Okay? So cultivating goodwill internally, even if it's not expressed outwardly. Try silently say, may you be well, may you be happy to people you meet, including strangers or those that you dislike. Right? So you can practice that. I used to give this example, many years ago when I was working for a boss who is very difficult, so every time before board meetings, when I'm there, I will always radiate loving kindness to him. May you be well and happy, may you be free from mental suffering, may you be free. So, well, I survive. I survive. So I think it's a good practice, all right? I think it's a good practice. So at least I don't get unsettled, So there haven't been an occasion where he said, I'm not sure what you have been doing here for the past 6 years. So time for you to find another job or something like that. Okay, but he asked me to tell other people that. So what I'm trying to say is that loving kindness actually is very, very helpful. So you believe that, or Buddhists believe that you actually can radiate loving kindness to other people mentally, right? Okay. So examples, replacing judgmental thoughts with compassionate ones. Okay, So again, when we learn meditation, when we learn to develop our mind, the word meditation actually comes from the Pali word bhavana, right? Isn't it? The word bhavana. So what does bhavana mean? It means to cultivate, to develop. Okay? So we should be like the gardener. The gardener, he always cultivates the land. Right? You want to grow, you plant some seeds, let's say some, I don't know, long bean seed, you want to have long bean plant, you got to nurture it, you got to make sure you have fertilizers, enough water, maybe shade. So similarly, our thoughts, all right? So this mind of ours, we should also take care. Most of the time we take care of our body, isn't it? We go to the gym, we walk, we exercise, that's basically much for the body, which is good, obviously. But we should also take care of our mind, all right? So meditation comes in to help us on the mind. Okay? So you replace judgmental thoughts with compassionate ones. Most of the time we tend to be very judgmental. There's another word, there are two very similar words. One in Buddhist teachings, we always say, instead of being judgmental, we should be judicious. They're very similar words, start with J. To be judgmental means you just form a conclusion. Oh, this guy is lazy. This guy is bad. This guy is terrible. Why? Because of past experience. So that's called being judgmental. That's the meaning of judgmental. To be judicious means that you actually, before you form that conclusion that this person is lazy, is bad, or is out to cheat you, you find out, why is he saying that? Why is he doing that? You try to actually give him a benefit of a doubt before actually arriving at a conclusion. All right? Again, you see, for the mind to be able to be judicious rather than judgmental, again, you need some mind training, isn't it? Right? You need to train the mind. So Buddhist meditation is actually helping us to train the mind. All right? In the Tibetan tradition, we use a word called lojong. Lojong, L-O-J-O-N-G. Right? Lojong. Lojong essentially means mind training. So, and there's a whole set of practices, whole list of practices we can use, how to train our mind. So that instead of being judgmental, we are more judicious. You be like a good judge. Alright? Okay, so that's the meaning. So in other words, once you're there, then you, instead of being judgmental, you have compassionate thoughts. Right? You practice forgiveness. I think this morning you recited in your puja about the importance of forgiveness mentally, even before speaking. Right? So we are there always to forgive people. Right? Wishing others well. Right? Wishing others well, even those who are difficult. Right? So that is why in metta, right, we also talk about we radiate loving kindness to those who are difficult. But we don't start with that, correct? Isn't it? Because you start with that, halfway your mind gets so upset with that person there. Halfway you say, I better change my mind, I'm not going to wish him well. Alright, so you start with people who are closer to you, who you don't have enmity with. So you meditate on loving kindness. So metta bhavana. So the word bhavana, which is a Pali word or Sanskrit word, it means to cultivate, to develop. So what is it that we want to cultivate? What is it we want to develop? It's our mind. All right. In the Dhammapada, I'm sure you remember, what is the first words of the Dhammapada? The mind is a forerunner of all things, right? The mind is a forerunner of all things. Okay. Now, people usually like to ask, what happened if metta is not reciprocated? Right? I gave so much metta, but instead the guy never returned the metta to me, So why, like a stupid fella, I keep on radiating loving kindness to him? So even if others do not respond to our metta, there's a discourse called Metta Sutta. You read it in the Sutta Nipata 1.8. Say we benefit with, number one, if we radiate loving kindness, we ourselves have got a peaceful mind. Right? We ourselves have got a peaceful mind, irrespective. In other words, you're not affected. Sometimes you read books, they say a mind unshaken. So your mind is unshaken. If you do this long enough, you actually reduce anger and ill will. All right? And again, anger and ill will doesn't bode well for your well-being. Right? They say that, the people who are always angry, always a lot of ill will, the wrinkles grow faster in them. So you may not want that, yeah? The sutta also says that you have better sleep and health. Why? Because If you read it loving kindness, in others, you are basically saying that whatever it is, I forgive you. Even if you are wrong, I forgive you. All right. So when you go to bed, you feel at ease. I'm sure you would have realized if you have you've had a difficult argument with someone, or you had a big quarrel, you try to sleep. Very difficult, right? Because halfway you try to sleep, the images of what happened will come. So how to let those images settle down? Right? So all these are psychological tools which actually you can find in the Buddha's teachings. Not in this discourse, but in many other discourses. There's another discourse where the Buddha talks about 5 ways how you can actually overcome distracting thoughts. Thoughts that disturb our minds. It's called the Vitakka Santana Sutta. So you can Google that, Vitakka Santana Sutta. So in that discourse, the Buddha gave actually 5. All right? But we won't have time to talk about that today. All right? Okay? So you have better sleep, you have health, you have inner stability, even in adversity. All right? So the Vitakka Santana Sutta. Vitakka means our thoughts, right? Vitakka Santana. Okay? So metta is not dependent on how others behave. That's a very important principle that we need to remember. It's not dependent on how people behave. It is a way to purify our own hearts. He said you do dana, all right? As long as you do it with sincerity, you do it with proper motivation. You know, your motivation is you just want to help someone. Now, if that person doesn't appreciate, that's his problem. Right? All right, then you realize maybe the next time you don't need to give to this person. Maybe there are always other more deserving people, because this person, maybe he or she doesn't really need it, so he doesn't appreciate it. But then you look around, but you have given, so there's gladness in you. You have done an act of goodness. It doesn't matter, all right? But there'll be so many other people who will be in need, right? So you don't only feel happy because people appreciate it, right? Some people may not appreciate it. So it is just treat it as a way to purify our own heart, a way to let go, a way to be kind to others. Okay. So metta is a softening effect over time. People may initially resist kindness, especially if they are hurt, suspicious, or hardened. But consistent goodwill can slowly diminish hostility, build trust, and invite openness. However, expecting a specific result can turn metta into a strategy rather than a practice. Right? You understand this concept? If it becomes a means to control others' behavior, it ceases to be genuine. Right? If you practice metta with the mind thinking, it's a strategy that I want to take, so that he will love me more, or he will like me better. Hey, it becomes a strategy. And then it's like you do dana. You give something, but at the back of your mind, you're expecting, okay, if I give so much, what will happen? Is this person going to help me? Or am I going to get something back in return? So you're always expecting something. So it's still giving, but it's no longer a pure form of giving. It's diluted. Right? So that's why in Buddhist teachings, there's actually 2 words for giving. One is, I think all of you are familiar, it's called dana. You heard of dana, right? I'm sure everybody knows. You hear say, oh, today dana for the monks. But again, dana is not only for monks, Many people, when they hear the word dana, they thought food for the monks. Dana basically means giving. And some people give also all sorts of motivation. Before they give, they ask you, oh, today who is coming for monk, for the lunch? Oh, monk. How many monks? Oh, you say only 1 monk. 1 monk, no need lah. Very little merits. No need to give. Or he said, today got 4 monks. Oh, who these monks? These monks, how many vasa? Oh, all these very junior monks. Junior monks, no merit. Why chief monk didn't come? No chief monk, I don't want to give dana. I have personally heard people saying that. Today never mind lah, because today very junior monks. So that should not be in our frame of mind, is it? When we give, it's out of kindness, out of we believe that it's an act of giving is good. So we talk about dana, so real dana. So the other word is chaga, C-A-G-A. Chaga. Chaga means you give without expecting anything in return. It's also a form of practice. Like this morning you recited the 9 virtues of the Dhamma, of the Buddha, right? It's called Buddha Nusati, isn't it? Then you also recite the 6 qualities of the Dhamma. It's called Dhamma Nusati. And then also likewise the Sangha. there's one more in this category. It's called the Jaga Nusati. So you can actually reflect on the goodness, on the generosity that you have done, right? Today, for example, or yesterday. So you recollect, you recall. And when you recall, then you feel a sense of joy, a sense of happiness. So then that will propel you to continue to practice Jaga without expecting anything in return. You see? So while these two terms means giving, dana and Jaga, but the nuances are actually slightly different. So we got to be very careful, be very mindful when we give. All right, what goes on in our mind is very important. Yeah? Okay? So Buddha didn't teach metta as a social tactic, but as a path of release from hatred and ill will. So whether others return kindness or not, the practitioner is cultivating one of what is called the Brahma Vihara. Again, I'm sure you know the 4 divine states, right? Loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, right? Sublime abidings. So this points to the deep unconditionality of true metta. So there are no conditions for it. It's expression of non-self and freedom from reactivity. Okay, so these are very deep words, but it basically says that when we practice metta, we don't actually expect anything in return. But by itself, you get the benefits. You see, it seems like a paradox, isn't it? You don't expect anything in return, but very naturally, right, you get the benefits. So that's how it works. Okay? So the real purpose is to purify the heart of hatred and ill will and to cultivate unconditional goodwill towards all beings. So this is the foundation for inner peace, right view, and ultimately liberation. Okay, let's look at the other 3, the last 3, okay? So the first 3 will be on loving kindness through body, speech, and mind. That's on the first 3 in the Saraniya Sutta. So the next 3 is about sharing of gains. So as I said, sharing of gains, it can also mean generosity. So here it says they share without reservation any gains they have acquired through righteous means with their virtuous companions. Now in Buddhism, wealth is not something that is bad or something that is been frowned upon. In fact, in Buddhism, there are a couple of discourses where the Buddha talks about the importance of having wealth. One is the Adiya Sutta. All right? But the key word in all these discourses, including the Dikajanu Sutta, so there are a few suttas, right, is how was our wealth earned? Did we earn our wealth in a righteous way, or did we earn our wealth in a corrupted way? Okay, so that's the key word here. So here you continuously hear the word. They say that they share whatever you have through righteous means. Like in the Dikajanu Sutta, the Buddha talks about how you earn wealth. Of course, during the Buddha's time, it's basically an agriculture country, right? So you talk about through the sweat of your arms, very, very, very tiring. So you work hard. You work hard. Okay. So of course, during the Buddha's time, you don't have people sitting in the office, air-conditioned office, But today, in a modern context, it means that whatever money that you earn, it has to be righteous. It has to go through the proper means. Okay. This means generous and willing to share resources. So when we hear this, so the question is for us to reflect. What can I share today? Is there something I've been clinging to unnecessarily? Sharing with others. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to share money, right? It doesn't mean money, For example, we look around at our home. Sometimes even we have clothes. They are still wearable. You can still wear those clothes, but maybe they've been there quite old now. So rather than keeping it there, we can share it with other people who needs it. People in poorer countries, for example. Countries which have just been hit by, say, tsunami or natural disaster. But make sure the shirts or the pants are wearable. Sometimes what happens is people just discard, whatever they can't wear, But that's so. You don't use it as an occasion for you to clean up your house, all the unnecessary things, chairs, all you cannot use. Okay, send it off to Sri Lanka or send it off to Myanmar, So that should not be our our attitude, right? Okay, so is there something that I've been clinging to unnecessarily? Something that is still usable, something that you actually like, but if you feel that somebody else needs it more, then you give it. Now, whether can we develop that kind of mind? That's the challenge, isn't it? So examples, you're sharing food, you share tools, you share books, even your time. Right? So time is a very important, your own time. Do you have time for people? All right? It is said when people get old, especially those of us who live with grandparents, maybe some of us are also grandparents. I'm also a grandparent. But those of us who live with our own grandparents, I still have a mother who is 96 years old, right? So to her, what sharing is no longer giving her money because she can't do anything with the money. Food, she can't eat much. So to her, sharing is just to spend time with her, just sit next to her, and she feels that she's still wanted. You see, so it's that kind of sharing. So sharing doesn't mean that you must have a lot of money to share. So you cannot say, oh, I don't have enough money, so I can't share. So sharing does not mean money. Sharing your time. Tools, for example, how you can help someone, right? That's a tools. Sharing food, for example. Not hoarding or being possessive of things that can be shared, okay? Like last time during COVID, people hoard, what do they hoard, remember? Toilet paper, remember? Remember those days? So sometimes I wonder, so during COVID they go to the toilet more often, maybe? So being generous with credit or praise. Right? So we can say something good, we say it. If you can't say anything good, no need to say anything. Right? Okay? So offering help or resources freely without strings attached. So remember, sharing does not only mean sharing money. Right? It means sharing time, sharing your time, sharing your effort, sharing your space. Okay? Now in the Dhamma-inspired Sutta, in the Iti Vuttaka, the Buddha talks about this. So I thought I'd just quote it. Because sharing is a form of karma. Right? So this is again the Buddha addressing his monks. He said, if people knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of stinginess overcome their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared, if there was someone to share it with. Right? Sometimes maybe this we find practice within our own immediate families, especially your child, or your spouse, the food is so nice. Before you finish the last bite, you say, why don't you have it? It's so nice, okay? Right? Okay? But monks, because people do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given. So the stain of stinginess overcomes the mind. So this discourse itself tells you how important it is, the importance of sharing. That's why in the Buddhist teaching we talk about dana as a first, in fact, as a parami too, right? As a perfection, isn't it? Dana, right? The 10 perfections, right? Now, if you talk about, since this talk asked me to talk about from the modern context, now we look in terms of, SDGs. In the United Nations, they got 16 or 17 SDGs, right? Social Development Goals, right? So our gains today are just not food or ropes, but what? Energy, land, water, minerals, technology, and wealth. So these are often concentrated in the hands of a few, while many lack basic needs, not because of scarcity, but because of unequal distribution. So in our small way, like this temple is a microcosm of the whole world that we live in. So just as today, for example, world leaders are being told to share more evenly, okay? So UN has asked international community to share for peace, justice and survival as part of the 17 SDGs. And today, many companies, for example, my own organization, right? So in our business plan, in our next 5 year, we call it Fusion Plan, we emphasize a lot of how do we give back to society, the money that we earn, right? We are a very profitable company, our profit ratio is almost 10% of our revenue. So how do we make the world a better world? How do we make this place a better world? That's the only way, by giving back to society. So the United Nations and in fact many corporate leaders today actually talks about that, right? Last month in BJF, we had a series of talks about leadership. Right, the first one was on compassion, and you find that some of the some of the leading corporate figures today, they also believe very strongly that we should give back to society, to have unequal distribution. Okay? So sharing as a global responsibility. So when the Buddha urged us to share our gains, he wasn't just promoting charity, but laying the basis for sustainable harmony, isn't it? All right? So you think of it in a bigger perspective, in a bigger frame. When the Buddha was saying that we should share, it was not just charity itself, not an end in itself, but it's a basis for sustainable harmony. In today's world, the same principle must extend. How we share food, energy, and even the earth itself. And this is a global responsibility. So we must ask not just, what do I have, but how can what I have benefit others? Right? This is a question even in our management meeting. Like, just this week I was in India. We had a leadership conference for 20 of our top leaders in India. And one of the things that I raised, that I brought up to them is actually the importance of how our profits, our revenue that we have got in the country, how can it be shared with different parts of India, which is still very poor. And let's not talk about outside India. Right? So I think it's very, very important that we must share. All right? So companies increasingly are no longer looking at profits just as an end in itself, but how profits can be generated. Like you know the word CSR, corporate social responsibility. So how much can be generated into that? And in many organizations, we actually have a monthly or quarterly report on how we channel our profits into CSR. So that's a way of global responsibility. And you trace back to what the Buddha has been saying. I think this is. So in India, I can give them examples of the Buddha because that's where the Buddha was from, right? So, but in China, it'd be a bit difficult. So ethical conduct is the next one, yeah? So ethics. So giving and ethical conduct, they come hand in mind. Dana, sila, remember? Dana, sila, bhavana, isn't it? Giving and then ethical conduct. So one lives according to the precepts in harmony with others who do the same. Okay? Living ethically in a way that builds trust. So you ask, am I living in a way that others can trust and feel safe around us? Right? So similarly, when we work in an organization, you want to work in an organization where you know that organization is not causing harm to the environment, that organization is not, feeding poisons to the planet, right? You don't want to be associated with this. If you can change that, fine. But if you can't change it, then you don't want to be part of it, right? There are certain things in this world we can change, certain things that we cannot change, all right? This guy, Stephen Covey, you heard of Stephen Covey, the one who talks about 7 habits of highly effective people? He said there are 2 things in this world we have to be aware of. One is areas of concern, areas of influence. Areas of influence means you can do something about it. So please use your influence to make that change. All right? Areas of concern. You can be concerned about many things. You can be concerned about the war in Gaza. You can be concerned about the war in Ukraine. At this point, is there something you can do? Can you pick up a phone and talk to Putin and say, can you please stop sending drones? And, you can't, right? So we can do other things. We can radiate metta to him, perhaps, right? All right? But there are certain things you can't. But there are certain things within our sphere of influence. So only you yourself know what is it that you can do. So you make that change, all right? So I think what Stephen Covey says has got a very meaningful reference to a lot of the Buddha's teachings himself. Because why? 7 habits are actually based on principles. And the Buddha's teachings are also based on principles. Okay? So examples of moral conduct will be not lying, stealing, or engaging in harmful behavior. Acting consistently, no double standards. Remember just now the first slide, the Buddha talks about you practice metta openly and publicly and in private. Okay? So your moral conduct. So it's not only when you come to Babs once a week or twice a week that you observe 5 precepts. Other day you throw all the precepts out of the window. Right? So you have to be consistent, isn't it? You have to be consistent. No double standards, yeah? And apologize when you're wrong. So I think it's very important that if we are wrong, yeah, we are wrong. We admit our mistakes. In fact, in another discourse, right, the Buddha talks, who is a great man? Sapurisa. You know, the Pali word the Buddha used, Sapurisa. In other words, a good person. Who is a good person? A Sapurisa. So there's a discourse called the Saraniya Sutta, where the Buddha talks about, well, a Sapurisa is someone, if he makes a mistake, he admits his mistake. And not only that, he reflects why he made that mistake, and he makes a determination that in future he will not repeat that mistake. You see? So it's not that, okay, I made a mistake, okay lah, you know, it's alright, you know, I'm a human being, you know, I'm not the Buddha, you know, so it's not that. So if you make a mistake, for example, you break one of the precepts, fine. You break one of the precepts, it doesn't mean that's the end. It doesn't mean that your spot in hell is guaranteed. No, it doesn't mean that. You break one of the precepts, then you reflect, why did I break that precept? You try to understand what are the conditions that led to it. Once you understand the conditions, then you tell yourself, so in future I will make a determination, I will not create those kind of conditions for this particular precept to be broken. So in other words, you reflect, you try to see what action can be done. So it's a combination of anusati, you know, that's why in meditation we talk about reflection, and a combination of adhitthana. Adhitthana is the Buddhist word for determination. We make a strong determination. And this falls into the Eightfold Path efforts, and four right efforts. You see, they're all interrelated. If you remember the Eightfold Path, there's right effort. Correct? And right effort has got four aspects. So when you make that determination not to repeat that mistake, you're actually practicing right efforts. And then you inspire others through your own integrity. It is said that the best way you can inspire others is not to go around telling everybody, hey, look, today I'm a Buddhist, or, you know, I'm a Buddhist. Why am I Buddhist? Because I practice 5 precepts. No point going around telling everybody that you're a Buddhist. More important is, does your action, does your moral character, does your life reflects that of what a true Buddhist is actually, or like a Sapurisa is all. You don't have to tell people that you're a Buddhist, but through your action, through your speech, all right, then people will recognize. People will say, oh, why is so-and-so behaving in such a manner? Oh, because he practices Buddha's teachings. Then people get inspired by your action, by your behavior, by your example. Right? Okay? So moral conduct, very important. So living with precepts. Here, this is very interesting. I thought this slightly, I thought I just mentioned householders. This is Buddha addressing householders, not to monks, you see. I just showed it because the Buddha also talks to householders. He said, both husband and wife wish to see one another in this very life, and also to meet one another again in the next life. Both should be alike in faith, confidence, alike in ethical conduct, alike in generosity, and alike in wisdom. Then they will see one another in this very life, and they will meet one another again in the next life. Very interesting, the discourse. So you want to meet your spouse again in the next life, then this is what you should do. Or your children, maybe. Alright, so I've given you the source here, so you can refer. Now, the last one is right view. Just take another maybe 5-10 minutes. Right view, is one maintains noble view in harmony with others. Right? Remember, right view is the first of Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah? Sharing a vision or understanding that supports peace, compassion, and wisdom. So we reflect together. What are we aiming for in life? What is our purpose in life? Right? How do we support each other in that? Isn't it? How do we support each other? In Buddhism, while you may have the image of a monk, you know, alone in solitude, in meditation, well, that is true. But a lot of times, the Buddha also realized that many people are not going to end up like monks in solitude. What about lay people? Right? What about lay people? Because the Buddha gives so many teachings. So many times I get questions from especially young people. They say, oh, when I go to the temple, all I see is about monks in solitude, monks in meditation. But I don't think I'm going to be a monk. I don't think I'm going to go in solitude. But is there something in the Dhamma that I can practice? Of course, because the Buddha talks about spiritual friendship. Buddha talks a lot about Kalyana Mitas. Right? So I think for the lay community, it's also very important for us to emphasize that. Otherwise, the young people is not going to find any relevance to the Buddha's teaching at the initial stage. Maybe at a later stage, they will realize that. In fact, in Buddha talks, how does one actually develop right views? Buddha talks there are actually two very important ingredients. One is, I think you all know, yoniso manasikara. In other words, true wise attention, reflective. But the other one, which is also very clear, mentioned in the Samadhi Sutta, is paratagosha. Paratagosha means associating with friends. Because you're good friends, then they actually advise you on what is a proper path. So friendship is very important. So two things for right views. Right? The Buddha gave a specific discourse. Well, actually this discourse more by Sariputta. You know Sariputta, the chief disciple of the Buddha? It's called the Samadhi Sutta. So there's a specific discourse the Buddha gave just on right views. It's called Samadhi Sutta. You can read that, you can Google that. It's actually, I think, a discourse given by Sariputta, the Buddha's chief disciple. And there it says two very important things to develop that. One is yoniso manasikara, as I repeat that. And the other one is paratagosha, that means the voice of another. In literal translation for paratagosha is the voice of another. That means a friend, somebody who guides you along. So very important that. Okay? So don't think that the Buddha's teaching is only about being alone, right? Okay? And anyway, the Buddha told Ananda, isn't it? When Ananda first came to see him, he said, oh Buddha, oh blessed one, you know, I think this holy life comprises half the holy life is about friendship. And what did the Buddha to Ananda? In the Upada Sutta, you can read this, Upada Sutta. Buddha told Ananda, no Ananda, this holy life is not half in friendship. This holy life, the entire holy life is actually about friendship. So that's the strong emphasis the Buddha gave. All right? So there are many more, we won't have time to talk all about that. Huh? Okay, so sharing a vision or understanding that supports peace, compassion, and wisdom. So all of us here, all right, we should be the voice of the other to share whatever we have learned for the benefit of other people who have yet to hear the Dhamma. So we like the paratagosha, okay, in the Samadhi Sutta the Buddha mentioned. So always reflect, what are we aiming for in life? How do we support each other in that? Okay? Examples, aligning around shared values, kindness, growth, mindfulness. So as a community here, how do we share these values that we have learned? You know, in either our Sunday class or in our own meditation, engaging in meaningful conversation about ethics or life's purpose, supporting each other's spiritual or personal development, and avoiding divisive or dogmatic views. Right? The last thing we want is to be very dogmatic and say, oh, only this view is right, all other views are wrong, or only this temple is practicing correctly, other temples are not. So we should not get involved in those kind of very divisive or divisive kind of thinking. Right? So maintaining noble views is harmony with others. So when there's disagreement, there's bound to be disagreement, right? On views, on plans, on preferences, we should always pause. So that little pause, that little space there, consider whether insisting on your own view is more important than the harmony of the group. Only you have to decide. Sometimes, just now I mentioned to you the word lojong, right? So in the Tibetan tradition, we have this, what we call aphorism. One is to accept defeat and to give victory to others. It's a very unusual teaching. One of the lojong, one of the mind training tools that we have. Accept defeat and give victory to others. Right? So it is something similar. Sometimes we have to insist, is our own view, holding on to our own view, is it more important than the harmony of the group? Because everything is relative, isn't it? After a while. Okay, so we have to see. At some stage, when there's an opportunity, that's what Buddha talks about, timely speech. When there's a timely opportunity, you can explain why, situations are different. Okay? Ask, is this view vital for truth, ethical, spiritual integrity, or is it a matter of preference? Some people just argue, right? Why now today, your chat group, everybody talks, who is right? Is China right? Is Donald Trump right? Or is Russia right? We can argue until the cows come home, right? But still, Xi Jinping is still going to be there. Donald Trump is still going to be there at least for the next 3.5 years. So you're not going to change much. Right? If it's not essential, be willing to yield or compromise for harmony. Right? The problem with this world is nobody wants to compromise. Right? Nobody wants to give in. Everybody wants to hold on to it. Okay? So, as a community, so for our own peace and harmony, we have to consider some of these things. So we practice kindness and respect even when you disagree. Right? There's a way there are many ways to say no. Correct? As I always emphasize in my sessions with our our management team. You don't have to always say yes. There are many ways for you to say no. But how do you say no? Do you speak gently? Do you preserve goodwill? Do you belittle others' views? Right? In one of the Buddha's teachings is found in the Arana Vibhanga Sutta. Right? If you have heard of this Arana Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha says, when a mistake is made, you critique or you criticize that action, rather you criticize that person. There's a difference there. Then you don't get personal. And I use the same example early this week when I spoke with my Indian colleagues about, of course, I told them, the Buddha from your own country, the Buddha said this, so you better listen well. Buddha is your countryman. And he said, in an organization, people make mistakes, right? So you criticize the person who made a mistake, or you criticize that action, and then get the person to understand why that action was a mistake. All right? So we also talk about what is called forward-looking mistakes. In other words, the mistake has been done. The more important is, did you learn from that mistake? What caused that mistake? How can you prevent that mistake from happening in future? All right? So rather than attacking that person who made the mistake, you actually critique that action. Get the person in to... My chairman used to say, when you make mistakes, when a person makes mistakes, it's like a small tuition fee, and you pay a tuition fee for learning. Right? So I think that's a very wonderful, okay? So listen carefully, be open to changing your view if valid reasons are given. Okay? So everything is relative. In psychology, there's a theory called relative frame theory. Right? Some of you who have studied psychology. So everything is relative in this world. So cultivate right view yourself. So you're less attached to being right in small things. More concerned with welfare, unity, and peace. Okay? Now we look at the United Nations right view and SDGs. The UN SDGs give us a blueprint for a better world. But right view gives us the inner compass. Without clear vision, even noble goals can become distorted. With right view, our actions are no longer driven by greed or fear, but by wisdom and compassion. And that is the true path to lasting peace. So right view is a vision that sees clearly, acts compassionately, and responds wisely. Right? So right view is very, very crucial there. So in conclusion, as we reflect on the Saraniya Sutta, we see that the Buddha gave us a very clear and practical guide for sustaining harmony within our communities and relationships. Because the Buddha knew that even when they become a monk or a nun, they still have to live in community. Because the word Sangha itself means what? Community. Sangha. It's a common Indian word. You go in India, you look around, you find a lot of these words, Sangham, S-A-N-G-H-A-M. It basically means a community or an association. You see? So the Buddha's Sangha is actually a community. Of course, the Sammutis Sangha would be the community of the monastics, the monks, the nuns, and then you got the lay community, also a community. So in some tradition, not so much in the Theravada tradition, but in the Mahayana, like Thich Nhat Hanh's group, some of you know Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away recently. His community is called the Sangha, and the Sangha includes lay people. Because it simply means a community. So you got lay people, you got monks, you got nuns. So that's his definition of Sangha. Right? But in the Theravada, I think all of you are more familiar, it's called the Parisat. Parisat means it's a fourfold community. Monks, nuns, male disciples, female disciples. So I want you to not get confused. So because Malaysia is a multi-ethnic, multicultural and multi-tradition country, so if you go to a Mahayana temple or a Tibetan temple, when they say, welcome to our Sangha, it doesn't mean that they're asking you to be a monk, or a nun. They say, welcome to our Sangha, it means that to them, the Sangha means the fourfold community. Then in your mind you think, oh, if I'm trained in the Pali tradition or Theravada tradition, or what he meant is Parisat. Parisat means the monks, the nuns, the male lay disciples, female lay disciples. So that's also right view of understanding, because different Buddhist traditions have got different ways of explaining certain things. Okay? So let's not be, that's what earlier there was a slide, let's not be dogmatic. Maybe in this temple you have been taught how to bow, isn't it? We do the fivefold prostration. Right? I also do the fivefold prostration. When I go to a Tibetan temple, I also do fivefold prostration, because that's the only method that I know. But in the Tibetan temple, they don't do fivefold prostration, they do sevenfold prostration. They lie down the whole body. So you're not going to say, oh, that's wrong. Well, why don't you do fivefold prostration? You know? Right? Similarly, a Tibetan walking here, they say, why you bow like that? You're not no full devotion. So, so it's just different culture, different ways of looking at things. So we have to understand that different traditions, right? They have grew up, right? So they have different ways of doing things. But the purpose is the same, isn't it? Purpose is the same. It's actually through body, speech, and mind. The bowing is the body. Whether you bow fivefold prostration, or you do the Tibetan, or like the Chinese Mahayana, the palms are open, right? Isn't it? The palms are open. That's the body, right? Speech is like, for example, chanting, right? And then the mind is meditation. Is it? So body, speech, and mind. So when you bow is the body, when you chant is the speech, when you meditate is the mind. So whatever tradition that you follow, you have that tree. Okay? Okay, so these 6 principles, loving kindness in body, speech, and mind, sharing gains, maintaining consistent ethical conduct. So the key word is consistent ethical conduct and right view. So they're just not ideals for us to admire, but qualities we should embody in our everyday life. Right? Something for us to take back and reflect on.